Get on the ground, boy! Officer Tanner slams the black man face first onto the patrol car hood. Officer Brooks twists the man's arms backward. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. The man's voice remains unnervingly calm. Tanner digs his knee into the man's back. Shut up! You don't belong in this neighborhood. Brooks smirks. Another thug where he shouldn't be. The man's wallet falls. Brooks kicks it, sending contents scattering across pavement. Please, check my ID. Blood trickles from the man's split lip. ID? You people never learn. Tanner tightens the handcuffs until they bite into skin. A police badge tumbles from the man's pocket. Next to it, his phone lights up. Chief Barnes, where are you? Emergency meeting in 10. The officers freeze. Their faces drain of color. What would you do if you were falsely accused and had the power to make real change? Comment below. Two officers realize they've just brutalized their own chief of police. Chief Alex Barnes drives his personal vehicle, a midnight blue luxury sedan through tree-lined streets of the Oak Ridge neighborhood. He's off duty, dressed in casual clothes, dark jeans, and a fitted navy sweater. The GPS on his dashboard directs him toward his sister's house for Sunday dinner. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across immaculate lawns. Barnes notices curtains shifting as he passes. A woman walking her dog abruptly crosses to the opposite sidewalk, clutching her purse tighter. Barnes takes a deep breath. After 20 years in law enforcement, he recognizes the look of suspicion all too well. Just dinner with family, he murmurs to himself, checking the time. 10 minutes away. Meanwhile, officers Tanner and Brooks patrol the same area in their squad car. They've just responded to a call about a suspicious person, the dispatcher's description matching Barnes perfectly. Another day, another call about someone who doesn't look like they belong, Tanner says, fingers tapping impatiently on the steering wheel. Brooks nods. My cousin bought a place here last year. Paid good money to live somewhere safe. Can't have people thinking they can just drive through casing houses. There he is, Tanner points, driving slow, looking at houses. Barnes pulls to the curb, unaware of the officer's attention. He picks up his phone to text his sister that he's running a few minutes late. As he types, he notices the patrol car slowing behind him. Barnes places his phone on the dashboard and positions both hands on the steering wheel, the procedure he's taught countless officers about proper civilian interaction. He watches in the rearview mirror as the officers approach, one on each side of his vehicle. Just stay professional, Barnes thinks. This should be routine. Officer Tanner approaches the driver's side, hand resting near his weapon. License and registration, he demands without introduction or explanation. May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer? Barnes asks politely. We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area, Brooks says from the passenger side. You fit the description. Barnes reaches slowly toward his wallet. I'm just visiting family nearby. Sure you are, Tanner mutters. Hands where I can see them. Don't reach for anything. Barnes freezes, hands suspended in midair, a flicker of concern crossing his face. Barnes must decide whether to reveal his identity now or let this disturbing encounter play out. Barnes keeps his hands visible, movements deliberate and controlled. Officers, I'm going to reach for my identification very slowly. Shut up and step out of the vehicle, Tanner orders, hand still hovering near his holstered weapon. A decision crystallizes in Barnes' mind. These officers' behavior mirrors complaints that have crossed his desk for months. Complaints he struggled to address without concrete evidence. Now he finds himself on the receiving end. Barnes exits his car with practiced precision. He stands tall but non-threatening. Spread your legs, hands on the hood, Brooks commands. Barnes complies while Brooks conducts an unnecessarily rough pat-down, fingers digging into his sides and legs. What's your business in this neighborhood? Tanner demands, eyes narrowed. My sister lives on Maple Drive. I'm joining her family for dinner, Barnes explains, voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in his chest. The officers exchange skeptical glances that speak volumes. "Got any weapons or drugs in the car?" Brooks asks, already yanking open the driver's door without permission. "No, and I don't consent to a search," Barnes states firmly. "Probable cause," Tanner says with a smirk. "You seem nervous." "I'm not nervous. I'm concerned about the legitimacy of this stop," Barnes responds, mentally cataloging each procedural violation. Brooks rummages through the car, tossing aside papers on the passenger seat. He finds a department folder but doesn't open it. "What's this? Stolen documents?" "Those are work papers," Barnes replies. "If you'd check my ID." "Found something," Brooks interrupts, holding up Barnes's phone. "Look at these texts about meeting locations." Barnes inhales deeply, maintaining his composure. "Those are work-related. I have the right to—" "Hands behind your back," Tanner suddenly shouts. "You're being detained for questioning." Barnes's jaw tightens. "On what grounds?" "Suspicious behavior and potential possession of stolen property," Brooks says, pulling out handcuffs. Barnes notices movement across the street. A young woman has stopped, phone raised, recording the entire interaction. He makes direct eye contact with her, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. How much more abuse will Barnes endure before revealing who he really is? The officers force Barnes against his car. Despite his perfect compliance, they wrench his arms behind his back with unnecessary force. "Stop resisting," Tanner shouts, though Barnes remains completely still. "I'm not resisting," Barnes says firmly. "This detainment is unnecessary and unprofessional." Brooks secures the handcuffs, cinching them until they dig painfully into Barnes's wrists. "Got a lot of fancy words for someone breaking into houses." More neighbors gather at a distance. Several hold phones aloft, capturing the scene. Barnes notes each witness, each potential piece of evidence. "Officers, you're making a serious mistake," Barnes warns, voice low and controlled. "Save it for the station," Tanner snaps, roughly searching Barnes's pockets. Brooks ransacks the car, pulling open the glove compartment and scattering its contents. He moves to the trunk, popping it open. "What have we here?" Brooks says, pulling out Barnes's gym bag. He dumps its contents onto the street-clean clothes, towel, and toiletries scatter across the pavement. Barnes watches his possessions being treated like garbage. His anger rises but remains tightly leashed. "That's private property." "Quiet!" Tanner shoves Barnes against the car again, the impact bruising his shoulder. Brooks discovers a small velvet case among the gym items. "Look what I found." He flips it open to reveal a service medal Barnes received for bravery during a hostage situation last year. "Stolen valor too, huh?" Brooks laughs, tossing the medal onto the ground where it lands in a puddle. Something shifts in Barnes. The medal represents the day he risked his life to save 3 children. This disrespect crosses a line. "Your badge number is 8734, Barnes states clearly, memorizing it. "And yours is 9215, he tells Brooks. The officers pause momentarily, thrown by his confident tone. "That's public information," Tanner recovers quickly. "Doesn't help you." Barnes spots the young woman still recording across the street. He raises his voice slightly. "What's your name?" "Sarah Winters," she calls back. "Thank you for being a witness, Sarah," Barnes says, his gaze direct and meaningful. The officers exchange uneasy glances at this exchange. "Enough of this," Brooks says. "Let's take him in." As they move to place Barnes in the patrol car, his personal phone buzzes on the ground where it fell. The cracked screen lights up with a text message. "Chief Barnes, where are you? Emergency meeting in 20 minutes. Assistant Chief Rodriguez." Brooks notices first, bending to pick up the phone. His face pales as he reads the message. Tanner?" "What?" Tanner looks annoyed at the interruption. Brooks holds up the phone, showing the message. "Look." Tanner reads it, then quickly glances at Barnes's face, recognition slowly dawning. It could be a different Barnes. Barnes looks Tanner directly in the eyes. Check my wallet, front left pocket. Brooks reaches into Barnes's pocket with sudden caution, extracting the wallet. He flips it open to reveal a police ID with Chief of Police clearly printed under Barnes's photo. The blood drains from both officers' faces. The officers stand frozen, holding the evidence of their monumental mistake. Barnes sits handcuffed in the back of the patrol car while the officers confer in hushed tones outside. Their gestures grow increasingly agitated as the reality of their situation sinks in. Inside the car, Barnes works his hands around to reach the emergency button on his smartwatch. His fingers find the recessed button and press it for 3 seconds. The watch vibrates once confirmation that his GPS location and a distress code have been sent to Assistant Chief Rodriguez. Barnes studies the officers through the window. Their panic is evident in their jerky movements and frequent glances toward him. In this moment of forced stillness, he makes a silent vow. This ends today. Not just for me, but for everyone who doesn't have my position or privilege. The officers return to the car. Your story doesn't check out, Tanner says, trying to maintain authority despite his shaking voice. No one at that address knows you. Barnes keeps his expression neutral. You called the wrong house. My sister's married name is Williams, not Barnes. We'll see about that at the station, Brooks says, though the conviction has drained from his voice. Barnes notices they still haven't run his license or officially verified his identity, a clear violation of procedure. They're scrambling, building a narrative before gathering facts. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, Assistant Chief Rodriguez receives the distress signal. She immediately checks Barnes's location and calls dispatch. This is Assistant Chief Rodriguez. I need information on any units currently at Maple Drive and Cedar Lane. The dispatcher confirms officers Tanner and Brooks responded to a suspicious person call 20 minutes ago. Put me through to their unit immediately, Rodriguez orders, her tone brooking no argument. In the patrol car, the radio crackles to life. Unit 47, this is dispatch with an urgent message from Assistant Chief Rodriguez. The officers exchange panicked glances. Tanner answers, This is Unit 47. Why have you detained a black male at that location? Rodriguez demands. Ma'am, we have a suspicious individual who matched a description. Have you identified him yet? Rodriguez interrupts. We're in the process. Check his ID, now. The officers hesitate. Brooks retrieves Barnes' wallet from where he dropped it in shock and opens it again, staring at the police ID as though hoping it might change. Oh, shit, Brooks whispers. Tanner grabs the wallet and examines it, disbelief etched across his face. The radio crackles again. Officers confirm you have Chief Barnes. Tanner's face drains of color. We may have a situation here. Barnes leans forward, voice clear and authoritative despite his compromised position. This is Chief Barnes. I've been illegally detained and searched without cause. My property has been damaged. Officers Tanner and Brooks failed to identify themselves properly, explain the reason for the stop, or check my identification before escalating the situation. A long silence fills the car, broken only by Rodriguez's voice coming through the radio. Chief Barnes, are you injured? Nothing serious, Barnes replies. But I expect these officers' body cameras contain quite an educational video. Brooks and Tanner look at each other, the full weight of their actions crashing down on them. The tables have turned, and now the officers must face the consequences of their prejudice. Panic seizes the officers as they rush to unlock Barnes's handcuffs. Their fingers fumble with the keys. Chief, this is a huge misunderstanding, Tanner stammers, finally releasing the cuffs. We were just following protocol for suspicious persons in the area, Brooks adds, his voice pitched higher than normal. Barnes steps out of the patrol car, rubbing his wrists where the tight handcuffs have left angry red marks. His expression remains composed, but his eyes burn with controlled fury. Was protocol to ignore my ID? To search my vehicle without consent? To damage my personal property? Each question strikes like a hammer. The officers glance at each other, desperately searching for excuses. "We had reports of break-ins," Tanner begins. "So you profiled me," Barnes interrupts. "Because a black man in a nice car couldn't possibly belong in this neighborhood." The sound of approaching sirens fills the air. 3 patrol cars arrive in quick succession, lights flashing. Assistant Chief Rodriguez steps out of the first vehicle, surveying the scene with barely contained anger. She takes in Barnes' disheveled appearance, his scattered belongings, and the officers' guilty expressions. "Chief, are you all right?" she asks, approaching Barnes. "Physically, yes," Barnes answers. He points to his possessions scattered across the pavement. "My property, however, has been treated with the same respect as my civil rights." Rodriguez turns to the officers. "Your body cameras better have been on." "Of course," Tanner says quickly, though his hand moves subtly toward the switch. Barnes notices the movement. "Don't even think about it, officer. Tampering with evidence will only make this worse for you." Tanner's hand freezes mid-motion. Barnes walks over to where his phone lies on the ground. He picks it up, noting the shattered screen. He takes photos of his scattered belongings and the marks on his wrists. More neighbors have gathered at a distance, phones recording. The incident has drawn attention throughout the neighborhood, and several residents can be heard on calls to local media. "I want these officers taken off duty immediately," Barnes tells Rodriguez. "You can't do that without due process," Brooks protests, finding his voice. Barnes turns to him slowly, his gaze piercing. "Watch me." A news van pulls up at the end of the street, a reporter and cameraman already jumping out. How will Barnes handle the media spotlight about to expose this incident to the world? Back at police headquarters, Barnes sits in his office reviewing body camera footage. The video confirms everything: the unwarranted stop, excessive force, and the officers' comments made when they thought Barnes couldn't hear them. Each viewing fuels his resolve. The department's legal counsel, Davis, watches with growing concern. His usual composed demeanor slips as the footage plays. "This is a clear violation of department policy," Davis says, shaking his head. "And potentially criminal." Barnes nods. "And not an isolated incident." He pulls up a file on his computer labeled Community Complaints. Inside are dozens of similar reports from black citizens, most dismissed due to lack of evidence or officer testimony. "The difference this time," Barnes says, his voice tight with controlled anger, "is that the victim is me." Meanwhile, officers Tanner and Brooks wait in separate rooms. Their union representative, Sullivan, shuttles between them, his expression growing increasingly grim with each conversation. "This is bad," Sullivan tells Brooks, closing the door behind him. "The chief has the footage, witnesses, and physical evidence." "It was just a misunderstanding," Brooks insists, pacing the small room. "You called him one of these people on camera," Sullivan snaps, "and you damaged his property." In the hallway, Assistant Chief Rodriguez intercepts Sullivan as he leaves Brooks's room. "The chief wants to see the officers now." In Barnes' office, Tanner and Brooks stand at attention, eyes fixed on the wall behind Barnes. The chief sits silently, letting their discomfort build. The only sound is the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, he speaks. 3 months ago, I implemented new community policing guidelines. You both attended the training." The officers remain silent. 2 months ago, I reviewed complaints about racial profiling in the Cedar Lane area. Your names appeared multiple times." Barnes stands, his presence filling the room. 1 month ago, I warned the entire department that body cameras must remain on during all civilian interactions." He places photos of his injured wrists on the desk. "Today, you proved that some officers believe they're above policy, above the law, and above basic human decency." Sullivan shifts uncomfortably. "Chief, these officers deserve due process." "Like the due process they gave me?" Barnes interrupts. "They're suspended without pay, effective immediately. And this goes beyond internal affairs. I'm recommending criminal charges. Will Barnes's aggressive stance trigger rebellion within the ranks of his own department? The next morning, Barnes faces unexpected opposition. Police Commissioner Wilson summons him to an emergency meeting in the wood-paneled conference room overlooking the city. "You're moving too fast, Alex," Wilson says, leaning forward in his chair. "The union is threatening action. Half the force is worried about witch hunts." Barnes remains unmoved. This isn't about two officers. It's about a culture that enabled them. The door opens and Mayor Hill enters, face grim. "Chief Barnes, we have a situation." He turns on a television mounted on the wall. Live footage shows protesters gathered outside police headquarters. Some carry signs supporting Barnes, others defending the officers. The groups face off across the plaza. "This is becoming a citywide crisis," Hill says. "We need to handle it delicately." "With all due respect," Barnes responds, "delicate handling is why these problems persist." Barnes pulls out a folder and places it on the conference table. "Here are 37 complaints filed in the last year about officers in that precinct alone, all dismissed or buried." Commissioner Wilson frowns. "Where did you get those?" "I've been collecting them since taking this position," Barnes explains. "Each one sounds exactly like what happened to me, except those victims didn't have a chief's badge." The mayor paces nervously. "The media's all over this. We need a unified response." "Then unify behind justice," Barnes says firmly, "because I'm holding a press conference in 1 hour." Meanwhile, Tanner and Brooks meet with union leadership in a small coffee shop 3 blocks from headquarters. Their narrative has shifted from denial to damage control. "They never gave you a chance to verify his identity," the union president argues. "It's an honest mistake made in the line of duty." Tanner seems unsure. "We did follow him before the stop, and Brooks did say that thing about these people." "Stay on message," the union president snaps. "You were doing your job. The chief is overreacting for political points." Back in Barnes's office, Rodriguez brings more news. "Sir, Officer Tanner wants to talk to you, alone." Barnes raises an eyebrow. "Without union representation?" "He was explicit about that," Rodriguez confirms. "Said it's important." Barnes considers this unexpected development. "Send him in." What crucial information does Officer Tanner want to share away from watchful eyes? Officer Tanner sits across from Barnes, fidgeting with his cap. The tension in the room thickens with each passing second. "What I'm about to say could end my career," Tanner begins, voice barely above a whisper. "But after watching that body cam footage, I can't defend what we did." Barnes waits silently, giving the officer space to continue. "This wasn't an isolated incident," Tanner admits. "There's an unofficial policy in our precinct. Certain neighborhoods, certain profiles, we're encouraged to be proactive." "Encouraged by whom?" Barnes asks, leaning forward slightly. "Captain Reynolds," Tanner answers. He never says it explicitly, but the message is clear. Officers who make more stops in wealthy neighborhoods get better shifts, better evaluations. Barnes's suspicions crystallize into certainty. And the racial component? Tanner looks down. It's understood. Reynolds talks about demographic anomalies, his term for minorities in white neighborhoods. This confirms what Barnes has suspected for months. Captain James Reynolds has been with the department for 25 years, outlasting 3 chiefs before Barnes took command. "I'll need this in writing," Barnes says. Tanner nods. "I figured. That's why I brought this." He pulls out a flash drive from his pocket. 6 months of shift briefings. Reynolds doesn't know I recorded them. Barnes studies Tanner's face. "Why come forward now?" "My father was a cop in the 90s, Tanner explains, his voice steadying. "He watched good policing get corrupted by the same attitudes I've been enabling. When I saw your face as we realized who you were, I saw myself becoming what I swore to fight against." An hour later, Barnes stands before a wall of microphones in the department's press room. Commissioner Wilson and Mayor Hill flank him, their discomfort evident in their rigid postures. Yesterday I experienced what too many citizens face, daily prejudice wearing a badge, Barnes begins. As your police chief, I've reviewed countless complaints about profiling. As a black man, I've now lived it firsthand. He displays photos of his injuries and damaged property on the screen behind him. The officers involved have been suspended, but this goes deeper than two individuals. Today, I'm announcing a department-wide audit of all civilian complaints from the past 3 years. The room erupts with questions. Barnes raises his hand for silence. I've also received evidence of systematic encouragement of discriminatory practices within certain precincts. Effective immediately, Captain James Reynolds is suspended pending investigation. The commissioner stiffens beside him. This wasn't part of the agreed statement. Barnes continues, his voice gaining strength. Additionally, I'm establishing an independent civilian oversight committee with real authority to discipline officers. Mayor Hill steps forward to the microphone. We should emphasize that most officers serve honorably. Barnes gently reclaims his position. Most do. But good officers are betrayed by systems that protect bad ones. He looks directly into the cameras. To the community. I've been on both sides now. I've worn the badge proudly, and I've felt the sting of its misuse. This department will change because it must. Across town, Captain Reynolds watches the press conference on television, his face darkening with each word. He grabs his phone and begins making calls. In the precinct break room, officers watch in stunned silence. Some nod in agreement with Barnes's words. Others exchange worried glances. He's coming for all of us, one mutters. No, another responds. He's coming for the ones who deserve it. After the press conference, Barnes meets briefly with Sarah Winters, the woman who recorded the incident. Thank you for being there, he tells her. Your video ensures that what happened can't be denied. I've seen it happen before, she replies. But no one ever believes it. They'll believe it now, Barnes says. Back in his office, Barnes reviews Tanner's recordings. Reynolds' voice comes through clearly. We need to keep certain elements out of priority neighborhoods. Officers who understand community standards will be recognized. Barnes forwards the files to Internal Affairs with instructions to begin an immediate investigation. His phone buzzes with a text from Rodriguez. Reynolds is talking to the Union, preparing for war. Barnes isn't surprised. Change never comes without resistance. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority until they realized who they were dealing with? Share your story. The battle lines are drawn, but who else within the department will choose which side to stand on? The aftermath unfolds across multiple fronts. Police headquarters becomes a battleground of competing ideologies and self-preservation. In one camp, officers who've long been uncomfortable with the department's unwritten rules see an opportunity for change. In the other, those who've benefited from the status quo close ranks around Captain Reynolds. Reynolds hires prominent attorney Maxwell Grant, known for defending officers in misconduct cases. Their strategy becomes clear when Reynolds gives his first interview to a sympathetic news outlet. Chief Barnes has a personal vendetta, Reynolds claims, his uniform perfectly pressed for the cameras. He's playing the race card to distract from his own leadership failures. Barnes watches the interview from his office, unsurprised. He expected this counterattack. Let him talk, Barnes tells Rodriguez. We'll let the evidence speak. The evidence grows stronger each day. Internal Affairs finds that Reynolds established unofficial quotas targeting minorities in affluent neighborhoods. The recordings from Tanner provide irrefutable proof of Reynolds' directives. Keep demographic anomalies out of the North Side, Reynolds says in one recording. We know who belongs there and who doesn't. More damning still, IT discovers Reynolds deleted years of civilian complaints from the system. Fortunately, Barnes had been keeping his own records since taking command. Officer Brooks faces his own crisis of conscience. Unlike Tanner, He doubles down, claiming they followed procedure. "We had reasonable suspicion," Brooks insists during his disciplinary hearing. He sits stiffly in his chair, union attorney at his side. Barnes presents the complete timeline, his voice measured. "You followed me for 6 blocks before claiming a suspicious person call. You failed to check my ID. You damaged my property intentionally." "We didn't know who you were," Brooks argues. "That's exactly the point," Barnes responds. "You didn't know, so you assumed. That's the definition of prejudice." The hearing board votes unanimously to terminate Brooks. He storms out, vowing to appeal. Meanwhile, community response grows. Sarah Winters starts a social media campaign called Ash, Who Are You Pulling Over?, encouraging people to share similar experiences. Within days, thousands of stories flood social media platforms. Mayor Hill calls Barnes to a private meeting in his office overlooking the city park. "This is becoming bigger than one incident," Hill says, anxiety evident in his pacing. "The reforms you're pushing will cost millions. The union is threatening a slowdown." Barnes slides a folder across the table. "These are 16 settlements the city paid last year for officer misconduct. Total, $12 million. The mayor reviews the documents with surprise. "The previous administration kept these quiet," Barnes explains. "My reforms will cost less than defending the status quo." City Council holds an emergency session to address the crisis. Barnes presents his comprehensive reform plan: mandatory de-escalation training, civilian oversight with disciplinary power, public complaint database, regular psychological evaluations for officers, community service requirements in neighborhoods officers patrol. The debate grows heated. Some council members call the measures anti-police. Councilman Parker pounds the table. "You're handcuffing our officers while criminals run free." Barnes addresses him directly. "I've worn this badge for 20 years. These measures aren't anti-police. They're pro-community. They protect good officers by removing those who damage public trust." After 5 hours of debate, the council approves the reforms by a narrow margin, 7-6. Outside City Hall, citizens gather. Reynolds's supporters organize a Back the Blue rally. A counter-protest forms across the street, chanting for accountability. Barnes visits both groups, listening to concerns from all sides. To the officers' supporters, he says, "I'm not your enemy. I want police to be respected. That happens when we're accountable." To the counter-protesters, he says, "Change doesn't happen overnight, but it is happening. Stay engaged, but peaceful." Inside the department, officers adapt to the new reality. Most follow the reforms, some grudgingly, others with relief. A vocal minority resists, filing grievances and calling in sick. Officer Tanner becomes an unexpected ally. He speaks at roll call about his decision to come forward. "I became a cop to protect people," he tells his fellow officers. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that means all people." His words resonate with some, while others label him a traitor. Captain Reynolds refuses to go quietly. He gives inflammatory interviews claiming persecution. His attorney files motions to suppress the recordings, claiming they were obtained illegally. Barnes remains focused on implementation. He hires trainers specializing in de-escalation techniques. He meets with community leaders to explain the reforms and gather feedback. National media spotlight the city's reforms. Other departments express interest in Barnes' approach. Police Chief Garcia from Phoenix calls, "We're watching what you're doing. If it works, we want to implement something similar." "It will work," Barnes says, "because the alternative has failed for decades." 3 weeks after the incident, Barnes receives a call from the FBI. They're opening an investigation into civil rights violations within the department, focusing on Reynolds's precinct. "We've been monitoring the situation," the agent explains. "Your reforms caught our attention, but so did the resistance." "I welcome your involvement," Barnes says. "This goes beyond one department." Reynolds appears on a national news program, portraying himself as a victim of political correctness. "In today's environment, Officers can't do their jobs without being accused of racism, he claims. The host challenges him. Isn't it true that complaints against officers in your precinct were disproportionately from minorities? Reynolds fumbles the response. Statistics can be manipulated. Public opinion shifts as more evidence emerges. Reynolds' support erodes when recordings of his briefings are played during a council hearing. Keep certain elements where they belong, his voice echoes through the chamber. We all know who I'm talking about. The mayor, initially hesitant about Barnes's reforms, now embraces them publicly. Our city is leading the way in 21st century policing, he declares at a community forum. Barnes knows the political winds have shifted, but remains focused on real change beyond optics. Officer training begins in earnest. Veteran officers pair with community members for dialogue sessions. Some interactions are tense. Others break through barriers built over decades. I never thought I'd sit across from a cop and feel heard, an elderly black resident tells Barnes after one session. That's exactly what we're working toward, Barnes responds. The police union files a lawsuit claiming the reforms violate their contract. The city's legal team counters that public safety overrides contract provisions. Judge Hernandez rules in the city's favor. While the union has legitimate concerns about process, the evidence of systematic discrimination necessitates immediate action. Reynolds' disciplinary hearing approaches. His attorney attempts to delay, filing motion after motion. Barnes refuses to be deterred. The process will be fair, but it will proceed, he tells the press. 6 weeks after the incident, national police organizations take notice. Some condemn Barnes' approach as capitulation. Others invite him to speak about implementing change. At a policing conference in Chicago, Barnes addresses chiefs from across the country. The choice isn't between supporting officers and demanding accountability, he tells them. The best support we can give our officers is clear standards and consequences. Back home, the first Civilian Oversight Committee meeting takes place. Sarah Winters sits among the 7 members chosen from diverse community backgrounds. Our job isn't to target officers, Barnes tells them. It's to restore trust through transparency. The committee reviews its first cases, complaints filed before the reforms. Their recommendations for discipline are measured but firm. Reynolds watches his support crumble as more officers come forward with stories similar to Tanner's. His attorney suggests a settlement. Too late, Barnes tells them. This goes to a full hearing. 8 weeks after the incident, data shows promising trends. Civilian complaints decrease in areas where officers have completed the new training. Community engagement improves. Not all problems are solved. Some officers still resist the changes. Some community members remain skeptical. But the foundation strengthens with each passing day. Barnes visits Cedar Lane, where the incident occurred. He walks the streets, greeting residents. Many recognize him now, not just as the chief, but as someone who experienced what they had and used his position to drive change. You're making a difference, an older man tells him outside the neighborhood grocery. For the first time in my life, I saw an officer apologize to my grandson after stopping him for no reason. Barnes nods. That's how it should be. Sarah Winters, whose video helped document the original incident, now serves on the Civilian Oversight Committee. 6 months ago, I was just someone with a phone camera, she tells Barnes during a committee break. Now I'm part of the solution. Barnes nods. That's how change happens. One person decides to act, then another, then another. As the disciplinary hearing for Reynolds approaches, will the resistance find one last weapon to derail Barnes's reforms? The disciplinary hearing for Captain Reynolds becomes the focal point for department tensions. The hearing room overflows with officers, media, and community members. Security guards stand at all entrances, a testament to the case's volatility. Reynolds projects confidence as he enters, flanked by union attorneys. His strategy is transparent, portray Barnes as an opportunist using one incident for political gain. Barnes sits calmly as Reynolds' attorney makes opening statements. Captain Reynolds has served this department for 25 years without a single disciplinary action. The attorney begins, gesturing toward Reynolds' collection of commendations displayed on a board. Now he's being vilified based on recordings made illegally by an officer seeking favorable treatment. When Barnes's turn comes, he doesn't attack Reynolds personally. Instead, he presents data charts and graphs displayed on screens throughout the room. Under Captain Reynolds' command, black citizens were 7 times more likely to be stopped than white citizens in the same neighborhoods, Barnes explains. His precinct generated 3 times more excessive force complaints than any other. The attorney objects. Correlation isn't causation. Barnes nods. True, so let's address causation directly. He plays selections from Tanner's recordings. Reynolds' voice fills the room. We all know who doesn't belong in Cedar Lane. Use your instincts. Proactive policing means preventing crime before it happens. If someone looks out of place, there's usually a reason. Officers who keep certain elements out of our priority neighborhoods will be recognized at evaluation time. Reynolds' face darkens as his own words condemn him. His attorneys whisper urgently, but the damage spreads with each recording. The turning point comes when Barnes calls his final witness, an elderly black woman named Mrs. Washington. She walks slowly to the stand, her dignity undimmed by age. Mrs. Washington filed 6 complaints against officers in Captain Reynolds' precinct, Barnes explains. All were dismissed. Mrs. Washington describes being repeatedly stopped while walking to her son's home in Cedar Lane. The last time, the officer said, "People like you cause property values to drop. I've lived in this city for 70 years. My son is a surgeon, but none of that mattered because of what they saw first." Her testimony leaves the room silent. Reynolds shifts uncomfortably, then suddenly requests to speak. His attorneys advise against it, but he insists. I've dedicated my life to this department, Reynolds says, standing before the hearing board. Everything I did was to keep neighborhoods safe. Barnes asks one question. Safe for whom, Captain? Reynolds opens his mouth, then closes it. He has no answer. The disciplinary committee votes unanimously to terminate Reynolds. As he leaves the hearing room, several of his former supporters turn away, unwilling to meet his eyes. Outside, reporters surround Barnes. Chief, do you feel vindicated? One asks, microphone thrust forward. This isn't about vindication, Barnes responds. It's about building a department worthy of the community's trust. Another reporter pushes through. Captain Reynolds claims you've destroyed his life. Your response? Captain Reynolds had 25 years to build a legacy of fair policing, Barnes says. He made different choices. Back in his office, Barnes reviews the hearing transcripts. Rodriguez brings coffee and sits across from him. Reynolds is finished, she says, but his thinking isn't. Barnes nods. One hearing doesn't change a culture. The real work continues. That evening, Barnes receives a call from Officer Tanner. The locker room talk is changing, Tanner reports. Some officers who supported Reynolds now say they were misled. And the others? Barnes asks. Some are retiring early. A few are doubling down, but most are watching to see what happens next. Barnes understands this critical juncture. The momentum of reform could either accelerate or stall. What happens next, Barnes tells Tanner, is we prove that professional policing and accountability aren't enemies. They're partners. After the call, Barnes studies the implementation timeline for his reforms. Phase 1 is complete, the structural changes. Phase 2 focuses on changing hearts and minds. With Reynolds gone, can Barnes transform not just policies, but the department's very soul? 6 months later, Barnes stands before the graduating class of the police academy. The class is the most diverse in department history, recruits representing every neighborhood in the city. You're entering a department in transformation, Barnes tells them, surveying their eager faces. Change is never easy, but it's necessary. The reforms have shown measurable results. Civilian complaints are down 40%. Community satisfaction with police interactions has improved significantly. These numbers flash on the screen behind Barnes, not as triumph, but as proof that the path forward works. Barnes implemented a neighborhood immersion program requiring officers to spend time in community centers, schools, and local businesses in the areas they patrol. Initially met with resistance, the program now has a waiting list of officers volunteering to participate. Officer Tanner has become an advocate for reform, speaking at training sessions about his experience. Today, he addresses the recruits. "I thought good policing meant being tough," Tanner tells them. "Now I understand it means being just." Officer Brooks chose a different path. After his suspension, he resigned rather than complete the required retraining. He now works security at a suburban mall where he frequently complains about political correctness ruining real policing. The department's transformation attracts national attention. Barnes receives invitations to speak at policing conferences across the country. His calendar fills with requests to share the model he's building. At a conference in Atlanta, a police chief from another city approaches Barnes during the coffee break. "We're facing similar issues," the chief admits, voice low. "But our union would never allow these changes." "Mine didn't allow it either," Barnes responds. "I did it anyway because it was right. Sometimes leadership means making the hard choice even when it's unpopular." Barnes establishes a coalition of reform-minded chiefs from departments nationwide. They share best practices and support each other through challenges. What began as 4 chiefs now includes 23 from cities across the country. The mayor, initially hesitant, now proudly touts the reforms in campaign speeches. "Our city is leading the way in 21st century policing," Hill declares at a community forum. "Crime is down, community trust is up, and police morale has improved under Chief Barnes's leadership." Not all problems are solved. Some officers still resist the changes. Some community members remain skeptical, but the foundation strengthens with each passing day. Barnes visits Cedar Lane, where the incident occurred. He walks the streets, greeting residents. Many recognize him now, not just as the chief, but as someone who experienced what they had and used his position to drive change. Sarah Winters, whose video helped document the original incident, now serves on the Civilian Oversight Committee. "6 months ago, I was just someone with a phone camera," she tells Barnes during a committee meeting. "Now I'm part of the solution." Barnes nods. That's how change happens. One person decides to act, then another, then another. The committee has reviewed over 100 cases, recommending discipline when warranted and clearing officers when appropriate. Their balanced approach has earned respect from both the community and the department. As the reforms spread beyond city limits, will Barnes's model become the new standard for policing across the nation? 1 year to the day after the incident, Barnes returns to his sister's house for Sunday dinner. He drives the same route, passes the same spot where he was detained. The neighborhood looks the same. Manicured lawns, elegant homes, quiet streets, but much has changed. New officers patrol Cedar Lane 1s trained under Barnes's Reformed Academy. They engage with residents, know people by name, and approach their duties with respect rather than suspicion. At his sister's house, the family gathers around the dinner table. Barnes's nephew, a teenager with dreams of becoming an engineer, shares a story. "I got pulled over last week," he says. The table grows quiet. Barnes's sister tenses, her fork pausing midway to her mouth. "The officer explained why my taillight was out. He was respectful, called me sir, gave me a warning instead of a ticket." Barnes nods, satisfied but realistic. "That's how it should always be. We're making progress, but the work continues." After dinner, Barnes steps onto the porch with his brother-in-law, watching the sunset paint the sky in amber hues. "You changed things," his brother-in-law says. "Not just here, but everywhere." Barnes shakes his head. "Change was already coming. I just opened the door wider." Later that evening, Barnes meets with his coalition of reform-minded police chiefs via video call. Departments in 12 cities have now adopted versions of his program. The data speaks for itself, a chief from Philadelphia reports. Complaints down, community engagement up, and importantly, crime rates stable or decreasing. What about resistance? Another asks. It never disappears entirely, Barnes admits. Change threatens those who benefited from the old system. But good officers, the majority, ultimately want to serve honorably. Give them the tools and training to do that, and they'll embrace it. Barnes ends the call and steps onto his balcony. The city spreads before him, peaceful in the evening light. A patrol car passes slowly on the street below. The officer inside waves respectfully. Barnes waves back, remembering when such an encounter would have filled him with tension. His phone rings. Assistant Chief Rodriguez. "Just checking in," she says. "The new community liaison program launches tomorrow." "I'll be there," Barnes assures her. As he ends the call, Barnes reflects on the journey. One humiliating incident transformed into a movement for change. His position gave him power that most victims of profiling don't have, but he used that privilege to lift others. A neighbor walking by recognizes him. "Evening, Chief Barnes. Good to see you in the neighborhood." "Good to be here," Barnes responds. Later, driving home, Barnes passes a billboard featuring the department's new slogan, "Protecting with respect, serving with integrity." In his rearview mirror, he notices a patrol car. There's no anxiety now, no preparation for confrontation, just the knowledge that standards have been raised and accountability established. The path forward remains challenging. Some officers still resist, some communities still distrust, but the foundation is stronger, the direction clearer. Barnes thinks about all the complaint files that once crossed his desk. Each one represented a person whose dignity was violated, whose humanity was questioned. Now those same files serve as teaching tools for the next generation of officers. He parks at his building and looks up at the stars. His father, also a police officer, used to tell him that true leadership means standing for what's right, especially when it's difficult. Justice isn't a destination, Barnes thinks. It's a continuous journey that requires vigilance and courage. If you were in Chief Barnes' position, would you have fired them all or given them a chance to learn? Let us know your thoughts. If you've been moved by this story of accountability and transformation, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button and subscribe to Beat Stories for more powerful narratives that expose injustice and celebrate courage. Each week, we bring you stories that matter, stories that could change how we see the world. Join our community of truth seekers today.
This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of what happens when truth meets visibility. At Beat Stories, we believe exposure is the first step to transformation. Subscribe and stay tuned, because the next story might be yours.